They say you never remember your first dribble, but the neighbors sure did. From their windows, they watched a skinny little girl in church shoes crossing cracks on the blacktop like she owned the street. She wasn't chasing dolls, she lined them up as cones, weaving between plastic princesses like they were defenders. Compared to the boys her age, she didn't have the muscle, but she had something sharper, balance, instincts, the kind of rhythm you can't coach. Parents shook their heads. Shouldn't she be in ballet? But the ball kept pulling her back. The playground wasn't built for her, no nets on the rims, no space marked out for girls. Yet that's where her story began. The irony? This wasn't just her story. Legends like Cheryl Miller and Diana Taurasi started the same way, grinding on uneven pavement, carving out respect on courts that were never meant for them. In hindsight, it looks like destiny. But back then, it was just a stubborn kid refusing to let go of the ball, dribbling through a world that hadn't made room for her yet. The gym was loud that afternoon, whistles echoing off concrete walls, sneakers squeaking across the floor. Everyone noticed how she cut through defenders, except the coach. His passes always seemed to find the boys, as if she were invisible. From the bleachers, her uncle smirked, whispering, "Dreams like that are for NBA guys." It sounds like a cliché, but it wasn't unique. Candace Parker once heard the same taunts about being too big, too boyish. Cheryl Miller scored 100 points in a single high school game, and still the crowd dismissed it. Just girls basketball. These stories weren't outliers, they were blueprints of dismissal. By the numbers, the system was even harsher. Studies showed that by age 16, girls were twice as likely to quit sports as boys. Fewer courts, fewer role models, fewer people believing they belonged there. And every time someone said, "She's good for a girl," it wasn't a compliment. It was a cage, a reminder that no matter how dominant she was, she'd never be measured on her own terms. Funny thing is, she didn't flinch. She sharpened. That sting in the phrase became fuel, pushing her to stay late, rewind highlight tapes until her fingers cramped. While the words meant to box her in, she quietly built a game too big to be contained. The story that people in the neighborhood still tell doesn't start with a warm-up. It starts mid-game. A summer streetball tournament, metal rims clanging, the air thick with sweat and trash talk. On one side, a squad of older boys, bigger, stronger, tattoos peeking from under their jerseys. On the other side, a girl barely in her teens. By the final buzzer, she had dropped 25 on their heads. Stepbacks, floaters, drives through double teams, the kind of performance that made the crowd forget her age, or her gender, or even the score. Local reporters scribbled headlines they didn't expect to write. Teenage girl steals the show in boys' league. Parents in folding chairs stopped whispering doubts and started bragging. "That's my daughter out there." Her siblings, once protective and hesitant, now looked at her not as the kid sister chasing a dream, but as the one rewriting the rules in real time. It wasn't just the points, it was the way she shifted the atmosphere. Each basket cracked the stereotype a little more, until the bleachers were buzzing louder than the scoreboard. The same people who once said, "She's good for a girl," were suddenly leaning forward asking, "How do we stop her?" But here's the twist. Dominance didn't buy her comfort. It bought her a target. From that day on, she wasn't just playing to prove she belonged. She was the player circled on scouting sheets, the one opponent schemed against. And that pressure would only grow heavier as high school gyms and national rankings waited just around the corner. Friday nights at the high school gym looked like theater. Bleachers packed, pep band blaring, banners swaying from the rafters. And every time the girls' team tipped off, there was one number the crowd kept waiting for. She wasn't just scoring, she was detonating. 30-point nights, double-doubles, runs that flipped games in minutes. Yet if you opened the local paper the next morning, her name was buried under fold. The front page belonged to the boys' team and to a guard who averaged 12 points a night but somehow had his face plastered across a full banner in the cafeteria. Teachers mentioned his highlights over morning announcements. Hers? Maybe a footnote, if the editor remembered. At home, the balance was even harsher. Her textbooks spilled across the same kitchen table as her scouting reports. Homework stretched past midnight. Alarms rang before dawn practices. She lived in the collision of algebra tests and fast breaks, the double life of every student-athlete, except in her case, the spotlight kept tilting away. From the stands, though, the truth was obvious. Parents dragged lawn chairs inside just to claim seats early. Opposing coaches circled her jersey number before the season even started. Every time she touched the ball, the energy shifted. You could feel the whole gym lean in. And here's where the irony cracked through. The same media that ignored her quietly fueled her legend, because in the hallways, kids didn't talk about the banner boy. They talked about her. About the girl who made the gym shake, even when the headlines didn't. Which set up the bigger question. If she could own an entire high school season without recognition, what would happen when the stage got even bigger, when college lights came calling? The first time her name hit ESPN, it wasn't buried in the ticker. It was the highlight. A crossover, a step-back three, and suddenly the nation knew what her teammates had been saying for months. She was the engine of the program. Students lined up an hour early just to watch warm-ups. Boosters requested her at donor dinners like she was already a politician. But behind the posters and the packed arenas was a schedule that would break most 20-year-olds. Morning lifts at 6 a.m., afternoon practices that ran long, then lectures and labs she couldn't afford to fail. The NCAA called her a student athlete, which really meant 2 full-time jobs with 1 paycheck, a scholarship. The school cashed in on ticket sales, TV rights, and merchandise, while she cashed in syllabi and sore legs. Her coach raved about her instincts, calling her the heartbeat of the team. Teammates joked that she was their metronome, always steady, never off rhythm. But in quieter moments, even they admitted it was unfair. The spotlight didn't just shine, it burned. Every missed free throw became a headline, every injury scare whispered like a national emergency. Still, for a brief stretch, it felt worth it. When her highlight looped on SportsCenter, little girls wore her number on homemade t-shirts, and the gym roared as if college basketball had finally made room for someone like her. Yet the irony sat just beneath the applause. She was filling arenas, but not her bank account. Everyone else profited. Networks, universities, sponsors, except the players themselves. And as draft night crept closer, she couldn't help but wonder, if this was the reward for being a star in college, what exactly waited at the so-called professional level? The camera caught the tears first, her mother clutching her hand, her father shaking his head in disbelief, friends screaming as the commissioner finally called her name. For a moment it looked like a Hollywood ending. The girl who grew up dribbling on cracked pavement was now a first-round draft pick. But step outside the frame and the contrast sharpened. NBA draft nights are spectacles. Red carpets, custom suits, private jets waiting on standby. WNBA draft nights, a rented ballroom, a box of team gear, and an economy ticket to training camp. The numbers made the gap even starker. Her rookie salary would be about $72,000 a year, less than some NBA rookies make in a week, compared to 7-figure deals north of $1 million on the men's side. None of that showed in the highlight reel. What the cameras captured was the smile, the fresh nails, the family's embrace. What they missed was the fine print, the trade-off hiding beneath the applause, because the truth was, the dream she'd chased for so long didn't come with glamour, it came with a bill. And that's the irony of her draft night. The higher she climbed, the steeper the fall looked. What she thought was an arrival was really an entry fee. Tomorrow, the gearbox and the coach with a mispronounced last name would be waiting. The real league, the one nobody televised, was about to begin. Her first professional game looked perfect on paper. 22 points, 10 rebounds, a rookie making noise. But in the arena, half the seats were empty. The echo of sneakers was louder than the applause. Average attendance hovered around 6,000, 7,000 fans, barely half of what the NBA draws nightly at 17,000 to 19,000. Travel wasn't glamorous either. No chartered planes, just commercial flights, delayed layovers, cramped seats. There were nights when the entire roster was sprawled across airport floors at 3 a.m., only to tip off 12 hours later. Fatigue wasn't an excuse, it was a condition of the job, and recovery, almost a luxury. Without the private trainers, cryo chambers, or state-of-the-art rehab rooms of their NBA counterparts, players wrapped their own ankles, soaked in cold tubs, and prayed their bodies held together. The injury rate told a harsher truth: too much play, too little rest, and almost no safety net. Sponsorships told the same story. NBA rookies signed million-dollar shoe deals before they even checked into practice. WNBA stars? Most scraped by with local ads, if that. The endorsement gap wasn't just wide, it was humiliating. So when she dropped her stat-stuffed debut, the world barely whispered. Meanwhile, an NBA player tossed down a dunk in warm-ups and went viral by dinner. The contrast was absurd enough to be funny, if it weren't so exhausting. And that's the cruel joke of the WNBA. You don't get paid for the spotlight. You get paid for surviving without it. Which left one unspoken question hanging in the quiet of that half-empty gym. How long can love for the game carry a player when the game itself refuses to love her back? The crowd in Moscow roared like it was the NBA Finals. She'd just buried a three, and the home team's owner, an oil magnate in a velvet suit, clapped from courtside. Here, she wasn't a role player or a forgotten name in the sports section. Here, she was a superstar. But the glamour was a mask. Overseas clubs in Russia, Turkey, China, and beyond spent big not out of love, but out of vanity. For some, women's basketball was a political trophy, a billboard of local pride. That's why contracts ballooned into six figures, why players traded home for hotel rooms thousands of miles away. The price was steep. Two-a-days that ground her body down. Meals she couldn't stomach, languages she couldn't decipher, nights where FaceTime calls were the only bridge back home. Even safety was a coin toss. Everyone remembered Brittany Griner's arrest in Russia, a chilling reminder that these contracts came with risks the league never talked about. And then there was the irony. In Istanbul or Ekaterinburg, she'd sign autographs for lines of fans, her face plastered on billboards. Yet back in the States, she could walk through an airport unnoticed, her jersey nowhere to be found in sporting goods stores. Famous abroad, invisible at home. So she kept playing, not for culture or adventure, but for survival. Because in women's basketball, off-season didn't mean rest. It meant rent. And as her flight touched down back in the U.S., in knees aching from the grind, the next WNBA season already loomed. No parade, no spotlight, just another suitcase to unpack, another league pretending not to see her. She limped off the court after another 35-minute game, knees packed in ice, wrist wrapped twice, back stiff like an old door hinge. The stat sheet said she'd saved the team again, but the numbers off the court told a crueler story. Consider this, an NBA bench warmer, logging 5 minutes a night, maybe scoring 3 points a week, pulls in $5 million a year. A WNBA MVP, not even $250,000. That's not a gap, that's a canyon. And the endorsements? Nike signs rookies to 8-figure deals before they've even touched the hardwood. Meanwhile, the league's brightest women, legends in their prime, still don't have a signature shoe. The inequality doesn't stop when the final buzzer sounds on their careers. NBA retirees coast into TV analyst gigs, coaching jobs, or cushy retirements. Too many WNBA players? They punch time cards, coaching high school, working retail, sitting behind desks just to pay rent, and the invisible wounds cut deepest. The travel, the silence, the constant fight for recognition. It's not just a physical grind, but a mental one. Burnout, anxiety, depression. Injuries can be taped. But who tapes a fractured sense of worth? From the stands, she still looked unstoppable, reading defenses like novels, hitting game winners that left gyms buzzing. But the applause died quickly, and when the lights dimmed, the loneliness crept back in. And that's when the question sharpened, the one no stat line could answer. If she had been born a boy, would her body still ache the same way, only this time on a $200 million contract, with a shoe line and a legacy that everyone pretended to care about? The scoreboard didn't matter anymore. What lingered was the echo of little girls in the stands wearing homemade jerseys, of teammates who bled through the same grind, of a league that refused to fold despite decades of being dismissed. From the outside, it looked fragile. Yet the WNBA has stood since 1996, born as a promise that women's basketball could exist on a professional stage. Along the way came milestones: Lisa Leslie's dunk, Cheryl Swoops' signature shoe, Diana Taurasi's reign that turned a fragile promise into a lineage. The system has bent, if not broken. The 2020 CBA finally raised salaries, improved travel conditions, and for the first time acknowledged maternity rights. Progress, slow but tangible. By 2023 and 2024, the ratings proved something critics never expected. People were watching. Caitlin Clark, Angel Reese, Breanna Stewart. They weren't just athletes. They were cultural spark plugs, pulling entire new audiences into arenas and living rooms. Still, the league's survival doesn't rest only on contracts or commissioners. It rests on fans. On whether people decide to buy tickets, to stream games, to share highlights instead of punchlines. Equality isn't a speech, it's a transaction. And that's the paradox. She never played for validation, yet the future of her league depends on it. The story doesn't close with a championship banner or a tearful retirement. It closes with an open seat in the bleachers, waiting to see if anyone will fill it. Because if the world truly wants fairness for women, the next move isn't hers, it's ours.